Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TARDIS. My name is Christian Cawley. This week, I am joined by Thom Gray. He is the author of a new book that's just out from Candy Jar Books called 100 Objects of 90s Children's Television. It's a nice little chat. It's about 25 minutes long. And basically, I chat with him and we go into some of the objects that are in the book. It does have a Doctor Who relevance because there are various appearances of the TARDIS throughout 90s television, as well as appearances by Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred. Not to mention, we probably talk about the Doctor Who TV movie from 1996 as well. I'm joined by Thom Gray, who is the author of 100 Objects of 90s Children's Television from Candy Jar Books. Hello, Thom.
Hello, good to meet you.
Good to have you on the podcast. I was alerted to the existence of this book recently, and I thought to myself, well, that's kind of I pretend that I wasn't watching children's TV in the 1990s, but then I left school in 1992, so I probably was watching children's TV in the 1990s because I have a sister who's 5 years younger than me. So when I was first approached to have a look at this and then speak to you, I thought, I'm not really sure about 90s TV for kids. And then I thought, oh, actually, yeah, no, I recognize a lot of this, what's going on here. And I think there's two things going on here, and maybe you can help me out with this. Is one thing is I did see a lot of this, but also, secondly, a lot of this is culturally important, isn't it?
Yes, massively. And a lot of it gets overlooked. I think we've got a bit of a culture where we focus on the sort of 50s to the 80s with kids TV, but there's a lot of stuff in the 90s that was quite, there's a lot of innovation. There was the beginning of CGI and the internet and things like that, so it was a completely different way of working. And I mean, I grew up in the 90s, so it was my diet of TV, but I was also aware of the other decades because we had videos and people were still repeating things on TV that were from the 70s and 80s, amazingly. I mean, I remember Mr. Ben, and that was a good 20 years old when I was born. So
yeah,
those sort of programs were always around, but it always seems to be the sort of the golden age, in inverted commas, of the sort of 50s to the 80s that gets focused upon. But you're right, there was a lot of stuff around then that is very relevant, and some of the names that we talk about these days started in their careers in the 90s doing kids TV. So it's very relevant still.
Yeah. Just with that in mind, then, do you have the opportunity to look at children's TV now?
Well, I don't have kids, so if I do, it's usually I have to go and search for it, or it might pop up on YouTube on TV. But it's interesting looking at some of the stuff that's around now. That's I don't know if it's quite timeless, but there's certainly elements a bit like Bluey and Sarah and Duck, which I think really the concept of them is a classic kind of format. You've always had that sort of style of storytelling and animation. I don't think children are always going to be children. They're not going to have that kind of awareness of fashion and how things change. So that classic approach to things was always going to be there. And it's nice to still see that in TV now.
Sarah and Duck, is that still going?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, wow. My eldest two are 15 and they used to watch that. And we used to sit there and watch it. And the opening time, they'd always try and match their quack with the duck's quack. For some reason, I don't know why, but that's what kids do, I suppose. So this is quite an interesting concept for a book, then, I guess, because you're specifically looking at one decade rather than like the entirety of children's TV or British children's TV. I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of why you chose that particular decade, but I guess it's probably because what you've just said, because you're a fan of 90s TV, children's TV, and you grew up with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's naturally my go-to in terms of my upbringing, being a kid in that decade. But I mean, I was maybe a little bit unusual in that I was equally fascinated by sort of 60s, 70s, 80s children's TV as a kid. I've got no issue with any kids' decade of television, but for me, it just felt like that childhood I had of watching stuff has never really been explored that much or in much detail, because I feel like even when maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was a lot of retrospective TV programs and books about, say, Rainbow and Play School and Grange Hill and stuff like that, and that's great. but it didn't kind of move along. We didn't get that kind of shift in generations where, you know, the children of the 90s and noughties are then getting that same level of research, I guess. I know there's you know, people putting stuff out online like TikTok and YouTube and stuff, but being able to speak to the people who made these programs and find out a bit more about their history has been fascinating. And also the people that I interviewed, a lot of them have never really been asked much about these things, because for them it was maybe part of their career that they've moved on to other things, or maybe that program just wasn't quite as big as they hoped. But also there was so much in that decade that I don't think there was enough exposure. You didn't get programs being repeated endlessly. It was just maybe one or two series on CITV or CBBC, and then it'd be gone. Whereas years ago, you know, everyone's seen Bagpuss, everyone's seen Mr. Ben, because they were repeated so many times. You know, it's multiple generations programs, those ones.
My kids have seen Bagpuss.
Yeah.
So who did you interview for the book? Is there any particularly key names to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, it's too long a list to say, but I mean, I think I did about 35 interviews in the end.
Wow.
So when you think about it as 100 chapters, if you like, 100 objects, that's a good percentage of them have got interviews in there. So of course you got all the kind of classic ones like Pat Sharp, who did Funhouse, Anne Wood, who was involved with Ragdoll Productions, so she did Rosie and Jim and Brum and Tots TV. And then you've got the more sort of, I guess, lesser known names, people who would have been writers and creators. So the guy who created the Dreamstone, for example, Mike Jupp. Also presenters like Gareth Jones, who did How and How To. So yeah, and I tried to find a good range of types of programs, and not just, you know, one sort of genre. So you've got sort of factual stuff and dramas and animations, and it just gives it this kind of context, and you realize that some of these people were coming up with these great ideas, and either they just didn't quite kind of get the audience they deserved, or, you know, maybe they thought, oh, it'd just be a little thing. Like the Teletubbies was just originally going to be quite a small, low-key program, and then that exploded. You know, so you kind of get a context of what it was like at the time, rather than looking back and thinking, oh, I remember that program, or I don't remember that program. Actually, at the time, it was big news. You know.
Oh, was Teletubbies in the 90s?
Yeah, 97 it started.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's been going. You know, it's had lots of revamps and reboots over the years, so it feels more modern, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of nieces who are in the 20s, and they were watching the Teletubbies. And I suppose I was by the late 90s, I was definitely out of kids' TV. You know, I was going to pubs and stuff, so yeah, I would have missed that coming along entirely. And yeah, so do you have any particularly, I don't want to say like favorite interview, do you have an interview that you felt really opened your eyes or really changed how you thought about something?
Yeah, I mean, I think what was really sweet was there was my personal favorite children's program, which I do mention in the book as being my favorite, so there's no secret, is a program called Roger and the Rotten Trolls, which is very popular at the time. It got a BAFTA and everything. But, you know, not a lot of people remember it or know of it nowadays. And it just so happened that the way the interviews kind of came about, I ended up interviewing three people. So the creator, the writer, the director and producer and all that. And it was really nice just to kind of get a full picture from all these three men about how it came together. And likewise, the same sort of thing happened with Maid Marian, when I did the entry about Maid Marian, because I started off talking to David Lloyd, who was one of the characters, and he said, oh, you've got to speak to, you know, Mark Bellingham and stuff like that. And then it turned into, I had Sir Tony Robinson on being interviewed as well. Wow. So it ended up being quite a long entry, but it's great because you get the full kind of spectrum of, you know, different people's experiences, having written it, having been in auditions, having been on the set and everything. So it was really nice to kind of have that kind of the layers of the story behind it, what it's like on set, the reception to it. But yes, I think those two, because of their depth, are probably the ones I most enjoy doing.
I thought it would be a good idea to dip into some of the items that you have in here. One of them is going to be very obvious for the for this podcast, but I do want to. I'm basically going to pick up ones that I'm not familiar with. I'm going to ask you to tell me a bit about them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's 100 to choose from here. We're just going to do 3 because this is a short podcast and you've got a life. So let's go with. Oh my gosh. There's so many of them. But you know, I'm just going to go for it because we'll start with an obvious one. All right. Totally obvious one. Anthea Turner's Tracy Island.
Yes, classic.
Because that was massive, wasn't it?
Huge. So I interviewed the editor of Blue Peter, Richard Marson, who has got just what he doesn't know about Blue Peter isn't worth knowing. He knows everything. And he was working on the program in the 90s, more so the late 90s with producers, with the presenters. But yeah, I mean, that was quite a small item. Obviously, they used to do the little makes where you'd get all your bits and pieces together and make something.
I've done plenty of makes after watching Blue Peter.
Yeah. I mean, it was in a way, it was kind of a bit like Art Attack, that you'd see it on TV. Obviously, Art Attack's in the book as well. You'd see it on TV and try and make one of your own. And it was done as a kind of an item just because, Thunderbirds was back on BBC. Well, it was on BBC. It wasn't on previously. And because it kind of hooked into the fact that there was not enough demand and not enough merchandise available for the demand that Christmas, it just hooked into something. I think it was completely unprecedented. And it kind of, I mean, it sounds like prior to that kind of early 90s Blue Peter was struggling a little bit, and I think it really gave it a bit of a boost. And I mean, it's the Tracy Island is represented on the cover of the book. It's such a big item for that decade. And it just seems a bit mad now, doesn't it, that you'd have something that has that amount of impact. But yeah, it's iconic, I think, for that era.
So for something like that, what's your research entail? Are you looking through YouTube videos and stuff, or do you perhaps have a huge library of VHS cassettes with old episodes of 90s kids TV on?
I mean, I do collect VHS tapes, so that does help, but a lot of them aren't from the 90s, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff's been uploaded on YouTube, which is very helpful. There's a lot of stuff missing still. But no, I mean, obviously watching stuff gives you a certain idea. You can get an element of nostalgia from watching it, and you can work out, what it looked like on screen. But where I tried to speak to as many people as possible from that time. Obviously, there's some people who are sadly no longer with us. I mean, we're talking sort of 25, 30 years ago, and they might have been in their 30s and 40s then. But what I tried to do is I had access to an archive, like a newspaper archive, and went through and found as many articles as I could from, either when the programs were first made or, as talk of them being made. And you get these little sort of gems of interviews and snippets and press releases and things. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult to confirm if all that stuff was at the time was correct. But if you get multiple reports saying the same thing, you can do your best. Because I had a few situations where I spoke to people that I interviewed, and they said, "I've got this news report. Did this happen?" And they're like, I mean, I can't remember last week. I can't remember what anything was like 30 years ago. So it's difficult to kind of get stuff confirmed. But to the best of our knowledge, as best you can for something that's kind of based on history, this is stuff that is correct. But yeah, so I was doing that and watching a lot of stuff. I mean, I was having to kind of really speed through things to get it done, because obviously if you've got 100 objects, that's not just 100 programs. Could be talking about 2 or 3 in each entry. So I dread to think how many hours I watched stuff, but it was not unpleasant to watch. So.
Wonky Donkey.
Yes, SNTV Live. I think SNTV Live possibly, I'd say it transcends being a kids program, doesn't it? It's probably one of the best programs of the decade, let alone kids TV programs. So obviously that feature was part of a bigger package of that Saturday morning show, alongside CD UK, which also has its own entry in the book, which is the CD single. And I mean, everyone remembers it from being the heyday of Ant and Dec and Cat and that. But when I spoke to Nigel Pickard, who's the producer, he was the head of CITV at that time, and he was telling me a bit about how that journey for them starting up from being PJ and Duncan in Biker Grove to SNTV Live wasn't as smooth as people remember. People probably seen this on documentaries and stuff already, but the first series or so was very, very quiet. It wasn't particularly well received, and then suddenly it just exploded, partly because of Pokemon and just the dynamics of them on screen. But yeah, I mean, I watched it. It was brilliant, and there's so much energy when you watch them back on YouTube. And again, it's kind of its time, because it wasn't really anything else like that around. Obviously, you had Live and Kicking, but in terms of like being able to do stuff on the weekends, you didn't have streaming or YouTube or stuff on your phone to watch. That was where the energy was through live TV. And I think that just captured it perfectly at the time.
Dean Wilkinson, who wrote a lot of the sketches and stuff for SMTV Live, he's actually been interviewed on this podcast many years ago because he lives quite local to me. So that's a nice little callback. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes if you want to check that out. So I suppose, well, go on then, because it's the 90s and it wasn't on TV. You've got the TARDIS in here.
Yes.
What's that all about?
I mean, I part of that was because Candy Jar does a fantastic range of Doctor Who spin-offs and connection with that, and it just felt like, I mean, I love Doctor Who. So for me, growing up in the 90s, that's when I discovered it. I found out about Doctor Who in 1996. So for me, it was part of my childhood, even though it wasn't on TV. I know you probably could say, oh, it's not really 90s, it wasn't really on, and certainly the TV movie wasn't really a kids program. It wasn't shown in a kids block or anything. But that's the point I kind of make in the book. So what I've done is, rather than talk about the show per se, I've spoken about or written about the things that were available in the 90s and how child-friendly they were. So obviously, the first thing you get, 1990, Search Out Science with the Seventh Doctor and Ace and K9 is a children's program. So you can have that in there. And then you go into sort of like Dimensions in Time and TV movie, less so. But then at the end of the 90s, there was a specific episode of Blue Peter that was all about Doctor Who. Right. And it didn't really it wasn't linked in with any event. There was no kind of anniversary. It was, as I said in the book, it was purely because Richard Marston, the producer, found out that one of the other staff on the team was married to William Hartnell's granddaughter, I think. I can't remember how to look at the book. And from that, it was like, oh, we've got an opportunity here to kind of make a program on this topic. And obviously Richard loves Doctor Who as well. And I remember seeing it, and it was a bit odd because there was no context to it happening, but it's brilliant because it was introducing kids to this program, and they were using it as a kind of there's fans online that are talking to each other in chat rooms. It's a really new novelty and stuff. So it was still around for kids, and obviously we had VHS and repeats on BBC Two and stuff. So it was still in people's consciousness. So that's kind of why that's there, but it is a little bit indulgent because I just love Doctor Who.
Well, I mean, the TARDIS, I suppose, various TARDIS props were used across children's TV, weren't they? I mean, not just BP. There's a clip I saw on YouTube not long ago. I don't know what it was. It was some kind of space-based thing, but I mean, it might have been from the 80s rather than the 90s, but it illustrates how readily available that prop was to just be like picked up and used for some purpose.
Yeah. It really was. I mean, it's funny you mention that because I literally make that point actually in the book about another program, which was called The Treacle People, which is this brilliant little sort of stop frame series. It's probably closest, to a modern program. It's probably closest to like Shaun the Sheep and Aardman sort of style. Okay. And because at the time the police box image wasn't copyrighted, you could say it's a police box and not have to even hint that it's a TARDIS. And in this animation, they actually use a sort of stylized police box, and it's a little sort of time traveling machine, or so I think it just moves around, doesn't go through time. It's never talked about on the screen, it's never in the script, but it's there, and it's obvious what it's trying to be and what it's meant to be, because there wasn't that kind of level of protection, I guess, over that brand, and also because it was off TV. I think people were still sort of slipping in little references just as a little hat tip. So you get that, and there's also there's a program called It's a Mystery, which Sophie Aldred originally presented, and it was all about sort of unexplained paranormal stuff. And they had an item about time travel, and the TARDIS materialized on set with the right noise and everything. And then Sophie Aldred came out, and I think there was a hint to sort of like, oh, you know about this, don't you, Sophie? Because you've been in one of these. And this was on CITV in 1996, so it was still being shown on TV as references, and I knew what it was, so it's just nice to know it was still around.
Yeah. I was watching, this is another thing that I do on YouTube, watching old episodes of You've Been Framed, Harry Hill ones, and with my kids yesterday or the day before, just like popped it on whilst we had a snack, and I think this would work in the 90s as well as it would work now. There's some kids on the climbing frame, and there's some sort of like blue paneling on the side, cushioned sort of paneling on the side. Harry Hills observes that the TARDIS has landed sideways on this climbing frame, and I think it's because it's so culturally important. The police box, and it's just there, and we all know what it is in terms of Doctor Who. That statement would have worked as much in the 90s as it would work now when Doctor Who's on TV or isn't on TV, as it might be. Something that I haven't got a clue what it is, which is the MicroSoap Rubik's Cube.
Yes. So have you heard of MicroSoap? Not Microsoft, MicroSoap.
Is it a TV show?
Yeah. So what
Right. I thought it might be some sort of cosmetics thing. No, I haven't heard of it at all.
Oh, I could see that. No, so MicroSoap was, I guess, kind of, as the title sort of says, it was like a sort of soap opera, but like on a very small scale, like one set, like a sort of theatre style, breaking the fourth wall drama. And the opening credits were, I guess now it looks a little bit ropey, but it was like a Rubik's Cube, and they had all the sort of pictures of the characters and that in the Rubik's Cube, and it would sort of go into, you know, formation like a Rubik's Cube. It's meant to be that it was based on a family whose parents are separated, and then the kids were sort of the focus of the drama, and they were talking to the camera about their experiences. It was very quirky, so I compare it to sort of like a bit of a David Lynch kind of style. Like it's got a little bit of a just weird sort of fantasy sequences, very strange designs to the sets. Mike Tucker, believe it or not, did a lot of the effect work on there. And so that's what that refers to. But it was another one that was very, very popular very briefly. I think it got a BAFTA. And again, it's kind of been forgotten about, but it was very different. And that's why it's in there, because it's quite a sort of quirky program. And if you watched it, you loved it because it was just so weird.
So was that live action or was that animation?
No, that was live action. That was on CBBC. But to be honest, the set looked like it could have been a puppet sort of show, because it was all oversized, and there'd be like sort of wonky lampshades and curtains and stuff. It was very odd to look at, but it was an actual, you know, life-size set.
Wow, that one completely passed me back. A lot of this, as I said, I think, was it? Tell me it was late 90s, please.
Yes, yeah, 98.
Right, okay, that's good. Yeah. I was in the pub. All right, that's fine then. 100 Objects of 90s Children's TV is out now. It was released on July 30th.
July 30th. Well, officially, I think a few people have had it. It's arrived early for them, which is fine. But yeah, officially 30th of July.
And you can pick it up via candy-jar.co.uk. Is it going to be available in stores as well? I think I've seen it listed on Waterstones.
Yeah, so I think you can order it online to collect from Waterstones and TG Jones. Yeah, so it's also on all the other big sites, you know, like the one beginning of A. But yeah, I think there's a few smaller bookshops that are stocking it. But yeah, obviously online these days, best place to go.
Excellent. We will include all the links to purchase that in our show notes. Thom Gray, thank you very much for joining us on Castorabus to discuss this book. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Okay, so 100 Objects of 90s Children's TV by Thom Gray is out now. It can be ordered from Candy Jar Books. That is www.candy-jar.co.uk. Click on the books link, and 100 Objects of 90s Children's TV is listed right there. I'll be back next week, possibly with James and Brian, possibly just with James, depends on how edits and schedules work out. Until next time, it's goodbye.